darling, I didn't see that too. Today we're gonna be, okay, I'm not actually British, let's dial it back a little bit. Today, friends, I will be sharing with you every single one of the classics that I own. Cheers. My name is Lexi and welcome back to my channel. Let's get the question out of the way. What am I drinking? She's very pink. This is an energy drink. So those are the vibes you can expect from this video. Also, how freaking cute is this little teacup? This was a gift from two of my friends, Britt and Sab. Thank you guys so much. I'm already using it, although please don't be mad that it's not actually tea in here. But yes, hello and welcome. Today, I will be sharing with you every single one of the classics that I particularly own. That I own. Okay, I'm going to be doing an updated bookshelf tour soon, but for those, I don't necessarily go super in depth. However, I actually love it when people go in depth for certain collections, and I really wanted to share an updated classics collection that I own. Here's the deal. I have a lot of classics here, and so I'm not going to be doing like summaries or anything like that. Number one, because they're classics, but number two, because I genuinely, like, there's so many books. However, I will be sharing with you what editions I own and sharing like the pretty covers and stuff, and I'm just really excited. I love videos like this. I hope you like videos like this. Yeah, I did do one of these videos, I think like 2, maybe 3 years ago, and I have added quite a few books since then, in my personal opinion. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started, and I will show you all of the classics that I own. Okie dokie, artichoke. Let's go ahead and start with, I think, what might be my largest collection so far, the Penguin, the Penguin English Library collection. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna be a little honest. I am a little biased for this particular collection. Like, I am obsessed with how all of the spines look, because when they're all lined up, it's a literal rainbow. And to me, it's so aesthetic and so beautiful. It's actually my goal to own as many books in this collection as I possibly can. The first book in this collection is Middlemarch by George Eliot. The second book I have is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. The next one I have is The Time Machine, and this is by H.G. Wells. Next up, we've got Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson with some lovely parrots. Next, we have The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. Next up, we have Villette, and this is by Charlotte Bronte. Then we have David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. Next, we have Sherlock Holmes with The Hound. It's not by Sherlock Holmes. It is a Sherlock Holmes book though. Okay, so next we have The Hound of Baskervilles, and this is by Arthur Conan Doyle. Then we have Great Expectations by Charles Dickens, and yes, I do have great expectations for this book. Also, I have like a flock of geese, and they're all fighting right now, so if you hear that in the background, you're welcome. Geese are adorable, if not a little terrifying. Okay, next up I have The Moonstone, and this one is by Wilkie Collins. Then I have A Study in Scarlet, and this is by Arthur Conan Doyle again. Then we have Dracula by Bram Stoker. We've got Tender is the Night by F. Scott Fitzgerald. And we've got Sanditon by Jane Austen. But wait, there's more! A good amount more, okay. Next up we have The Picture of Dorian Gray, and this is by Oscar Wilde, one of my very favorite books of all time. Then we have The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, and not to be basic, but again, this is another classic favorite of mine. Yes, Jay Gatsby can have all of me. Daisy sucks. Next up we have The Murders in the Rue Morgue and Other Tales by Edgar Allan Poe, my spooky little love. Then we have Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift. I love Jonathan Swift. Next up we have a book that I shouldn't love because it is toxic as but I do absolutely adore it with my whole entire heart, and that is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I love it, okay? I love it with my whole heart. I just got foundation on it. Damn it! Next up we have 1984 by George Orwell. Scary, sci-fi, dystopian. Is it dystopian? I just know it's scary sci-fi. Those geese are so mad. Next up, we have Lady Audley's Secret by Mary Elizabeth Braden or Braddon. And then finally, rounding out the books, we've got Vanity Fair by William Makepeace Thackeray. And every single time I hear the word Thackeray, or like the name rather, I think of Thackeray Binks from, was his last name Banks? I think it was. But I think of Thackeray from Hocus Pocus. And now I want to rewatch Hocus Pocus, so that's cool. Next, let's move on to the Oxford classics that I own. Now, I don't actually own a ton of Oxford classics. I have 3 here, but I love these editions so much. The first one I have is Anne Radcliffe's The Mysteries of Udolpho. And I actually purchased this one because Gavin really, really likes Anne Radcliffe, although I think he recommended the next one that I'm gonna hold up. I just dropped one, I'm sorry. Gavin actually recommended I check out The Italian by Anne Radcliffe, and these are both Gothic stories. And I love a good Gothic moment, you know what I mean? Like my spooky Wednesday Addams heart just thrives in the Gothic genre. And then next up I have Don Quixote, and this is by Miguel de Cervantes, I think. And that's it for the Oxford classics. Let's move on to the next collection. Next up I have several vintage classics editions. Let's start with the Russian vintage classic editions. Okay, the first one I have here is War and Peace, and this is by Leo Tolstoy. Amazing. The book does in fact double as a weapon if someone is trying to break into your home. Another selling point. Because could you imagine getting hit in the head with this thing? I mean, you would be gone. War and Peace, more like just war. Because if you're breaking into my house, there's no peace. Okay. The next one I have here is again by Leo Tolstoy, and that is Anna Karenina. And this one, ooh, look at how beautiful that is. Next, I have The Master and Margarita, and this is by Mikhail Bulgakov, I think, maybe. I don't know, but that is what it looks like here. And this is the inside. I mean, just beautiful. So gorgeous. And then the very last Russian classic that I own in this particular edition is gonna be Crime and Punishment. And this is the inside flap. So next up, let's go to the vintage classics. I have 3 different collections. I have the Jane Austen collection, the Virginia Woolf collection, and the Iris Murdoch collection. So for Iris Murdoch, we have the Black Prince and the inside flap. Looks like that. Then we have the Sea with the inside flap. Ooh, okay. It's like a little, what is that, an eel? Cute. Then we have the Sand Castle. The inside flap looks like that. And then finally we have Iris Murdoch's The Bell with the inside flap looking like that. Next up we have Jane Austen. I love Jane Austen. I love a good Jane Austen romance. The first one I have here is Emma, which I'm gonna be honest is my very favorite Jane Austen book I've ever read, with the inside flap looking like this. Then we have Persuasion with a very colorful inside flap. Then we have Sense and Sensibility. I haven't read this one actually. And then the inside flap looks like that. Next we have Northanger Abbey, which is her only, I think, attempt at a satirical Gothic tale with the inside flap looking like this. So this one matches Emma. Then we have Mansfield Park with the inside flap matching Persuasion. And finally, I have Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, a classic with the hand. You know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about, okay? And that is the flap. And then finally, I have Virginia Woolf. So I love Virginia Woolf. I read, I think it was Mrs. Dalloway, and Mrs. Dalloway rocked my world, okay? Not to sound dramatic, but it rocked my world and it made me feel things. Let's start off with my favorite, which is Mrs. Dalloway. Love it so much, love her so much. Here is the lovely flap. It kind of looks like almost raindrops, sort of. Then we have Orlando by Virginia, well, I won't say her name every time. We all know this is the Virginia Woolf moment. Okay, we've got Orlando here. This is what the inside flap looks like. And I really like the Virginia Woolf collection because they feel very, very abstract. And I really appreciate that. I feel like it looks very artistic and just stunning. Then we have The Waves, and this is the beautiful flap. Next up, we have A Room of One's Own with a very stunning flap. Then we have Flush, and then this is the flap. There's a bookmark in here. Okay, that's an added bonus for me. Then we have To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. There we go. And then finally, we have The Years. again by Miss Virginia Woolf. And this is the flap. Oh my gosh, there's another bookmark in here. I don't remember putting these bookmarks in here, so that's exciting. Next up, I have possibly my largest collection, or if not my largest, I think it might be my second largest, and that is the Penguin Classics Deluxe Edition. So these are the ones with like the really, really fun illustrated covers and like the deckled edges, and I really, really like these. I think all of these also have the French flap, but there's nothing on the inside, so I won't be sharing that. Let's start though with the very first one, which is The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway. Next up, we have another edition of Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. Listen, I will collect every edition that I find in this book. I love this book for unknown reasons, really, because I know it's toxic. But you know what? I like it. Next up, we have James Joyce's Dubliners. Very nice. Then we've got The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. And I've actually heard that this is not as scary as the TV series. I still haven't read this. I really, really want to. Then we have Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. Then we have Always Lived in the Castle by Anne Bronte. No, by Shirley Jackson. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. Next, we have another edition of Emma. I actually saw this on somebody else's channel and I was like, okay, I need that edition too. And that is Emma by Jane Austen. Okay, I kind of gave it away, but yeah. Then we have The Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer. I've only read about 4, I think, of these particular tales. Again, I studied this at university. The stories that I read were so vastly different from each other and also so well done. One was hilarious. It's called The Miller's Wife. And it's like, thinking about it now, it still makes me laugh. I'm laughing on the inside. Then we have another James Joyce. This one is a portrait of the artist as a young man. Next up, we've got Moby Dick or The Whale by Herman Melville. Next up, we have Sherlock Holmes. Then we have Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. I love the musical of this so much and it makes me cry every single time. And then finally, the last book in this particular collection is going to be The Divine Comedy by Dante with the Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso. I read the Inferno and studied it at university. It is fascinating. It is a wild time. Not only was the story really, really good, but the history behind it was impeccable. I highly recommend that you look up Dante and all of the gossip and drama surrounding him in his life. You will never read the Inferno the same. That's all I'm saying. Next up, let's move on to the Virago Modern Classics. This is another fun collection that I really, really enjoy because not only are they super colorful, I just really love the spines. Like, I think that they're so much fun and I really, really want to collect all of the books in these collections. Let's start with Mrs. Palfrey at the Claremont by Elizabeth Taylor. It's like a literal work of art. Next up, I have The Birds by Daphne du Maurier. Then we have Strangers on a Train by Patricia Highsmith. Then we have The Talented Mr. Ripley by Patricia Highsmith. Also, if you have not seen the movie for this, oh my God, what a literal dream. It's so beautiful. Then we have Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Then we have My Cousin Rachel by Daphne du Maurier. And finally, rounding out the collection, we have Jamaica Inn by Daphne du Maurier. Next up, I have Vintage Classics, and these are just like the all-white Charles Dickens versions. Let's go ahead and start with Charles Dickens' Great Expectations. Then we have Oliver Twist. Next up, we have Bleak House. Next up, we have Hard Times. Then we have David Copperfield. Then we have A Christmas Carol. And then finally, rounding out that collection is going to be A Tale of Two Cities, again by Mr. Charles Dickens. And that's it for those collections. Now let's move on to the next several. We've got a lot to cover. Okay. The next collection that I have are going to be the No Fear Shakespeare ones. And listen, I know that maybe these are not the most aesthetically pleasing of the bunch, but if you want to read Shakespeare and you want to read him without fear, I highly recommend this series. Okay, so we have got Hamlet, we've got Twelfth Night, we've got Othello, we have As You Like It. Why am I saying we? It's me. These are mine. Next up is Macbeth. Then we have Julius Caesar. Then Much Ado About Nothing, A Midsummer Night's Dream, Romeo and Juliet, and finally, The Tempest. The Tempest. Oh my God, have I been saying this title wrong my whole life? I've been saying The Tempest my whole life. Next up, I have one Penguin classic in this like kind of buttery color here, and that is Bleak House. I bought this used. It's so well loved, and it's actually one of my very favorite editions of any classic I own because of how like well loved it is. I don't know how to explain it. This book is just like a comfort to me. As she freaking breaks it, are you joking? Then we have Penguin Classics editions in like the little black kind, you know what I'm talking about, right? Like you see these all the time, maybe at Barnes & Noble, and they're both Steinbecks. So we have East of Eden and Grapes of Wrath, and I believe this is actually one of my dad's favorite books. Next up, I have the Every Man's Library editions. Let me hold it so you can see it. Ta-da! But I have Bleak House again, Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials. Then I have the Arabian Nights. And then finally, I also have Persuasion by Jane Austen. Next, I have this collection of Penguin books, and I would tell you a more specific edition, but it literally just says Penguin books. But I do know that these are all Gothic books. So I think this is like the Penguin Books Gothic editions. And I really, really like these because it kind of feels like a faux leather, but it has this beautiful metallic on every single one of these books. And I just really, really enjoy this collection. The first Gothic Penguin book that I have is Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights once again. Then I have Edgar Allan Poe's The Murders in the Rue Morgue and Other Tales. Then I have Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Then I have Robert Louis Stevenson's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Then I have Bram Stoker's Dracula. Then I have Arthur Conan Doyle's The Greatest Cases of Sherlock Holmes. So I think this is a bind up of just like a couple of the cases. Next up, we have Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. And then we have Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray. And next up, I'm going to share with you all of my leather bound editions. I don't know each and every single one of these editions. Some of these I found thrifting. Some were gifts to me, like back one particular Christmas, my parents actually bought me a gift box set, I think when I was 12, because I've always wanted to collect leather editions. So they're kind of like from all over. I know a couple are also from Barnes & Noble, but these are just all of my leather bound classics grouped together, possibly from like different publishers and things like that. First up, we have Pride and Prejudice. Then we have Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne. Then we have A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Then we have The Red Badge of Courage, and this is, who is this by? Stephen Crane. Stephen Crane's name is not on the cover, and I'm very confused as to why. Next, we have The Jungle Book, and this is by Rudyard Kipling. And then next, we have another edition of Moby Dick. Next up, we have The Lost World by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Then we have The Call of the Wild, and this is by White Fang. No, it's not. It's by Jack London. So then we have The Scarlet Pimpernel. We have another Great Expectations. And then this was actually a very kind gift from a subscriber. We've got The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Ooh, with the gold. Okay, I think actually they all have gold. Next up, we have The Iliad and the Odyssey by Homer. Then we have A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. Then we have Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. We've got another Arabian Nights edition. We've got another Wuthering Heights edition. We have another Anna Karenina edition by Leo Tolstoy. And then finally, we have The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. I don't know why I said finally. There's another stack of leather bounds right there. Next, we have a Hans Christian Andersen Complete Fairy Tales bind up. Then we have Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift, which it doesn't say on the cover. That is so pretty. This is one of the ones that I think I got thrifting. Then we have The Three Musketeers by Alexander Dumas. Then we have another edition of Treasure Island. We've got The Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman, which is a poetry collection. And then finally, we have The Wind in the Willows, and this is by Kenneth Graham. And those are all of my leather bounds. Yes. Now let's move on to my rare and vintage editions of books. And this is like a very small collection, so it should go pretty quick. My first vintage collection that I have, I'm gonna be super brief with, and it is the Mark Twain collection. I don't actually know how old these are. These were a gift from my grandfather when he passed away. And so they mean a lot to me. I have not read them, but every time I open them, it kind of smells like my grandparents' house, and it just reminds me of my grandpa and of my grandma. These are all of the books in that particular edition, and they are all Mark Twain's works. This next book is a book, I think, of French poetry, and I actually got this while thrifting, I want to say in Atlanta, and it was made in 1906. And I just think it's really, really cool. Like, I think the history behind a lot of these vintage and rare books are so cool. Then these two books I actually got while I was studying abroad in Edinburgh, and I love them both so very much. The first one is The Princess of Silverland, and this is by Elsie Striverlin. I don't actually know, but that is the book, and it's just so precious to me. And then the next one I got was Early English Poems, which is ironic because I actually got this in Scotland, not England, but yes. And then the final vintage book that I got was this, which is the British poetry book. It's massive and it's so beautiful, and it's very, very old, and it just smells amazing. So yes, there's that one. And this was written and published, let's see here, in 1878. So I think that's it as far as like my main collections. The rest of the books are going to be classics, but they're going to be individual classics, not necessarily as part of a larger collection that I own. So yes, let's go ahead and do all of the individual classics next. The first one I have here is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, and this is illustrated by Alice Patullo. It's so beautiful because it's fully illustrated, and I love this edition so incredibly much. I feel like Alice's illustrations really, really add to the story of Pride and Prejudice. So if you love Pride and Prejudice, I highly, highly recommend checking this particular edition out. Then we have Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll, and this particular one is also illustrated, and this one is illustrated by Anne Bonn, and I love the illustration style in this particular one as well. I just think it's so beautiful and such a great coffee table book. Then I have two Peter Pan ones here that are illustrated. The first one is this particular one, and this is illustrated by Scott Gustafson, and I just think this particular edition is so romantic and just stunning. I've had this ever since I was a little kid, and I think it's so just beautiful, and it also just reminds me of my childhood. Then I have this one. This particular Peter Pan actually has illustrations by Raquel Jarmillo, but these are actually more photographs. So I believe this is Italian, and this artist took these incredible photos and just made them look sort of like they were the characters from Peter Pan. Then I have two Angela Carter editions. The first one is in the, is this the Virago Classics again? Yeah, this is Virago Modern Classics, and it is the Magic Toy Shop. The next one is The Bloody Chamber. This one is by Vintage Classics, and I think it is beautiful. Then this one is really, really interesting. It is Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway, but if you flip it, it's then Michael Cunningham's The Hours, which is his sort of interpretation and take on Mrs. Dalloway, but also I think he merges it with the story of Virginia Woolf. Then we have just the standard Beloved Toni Morrison. This is like, if you look up Beloved, this is like the editions that usually come up. Then I have two Kurt Vonnegut's in these really, I love these editions so much. What are these particular ones called? This is a Dial Press Trade paperback. I have two Agatha Christie's. I don't necessarily like have any feelings on these editions one way or the other, by HarperCollins Publishers. So there we go. Then I have three Gabriel Garcia Marquez. The first one I have here is 100 Years of Solitude. Then I have his Collected Stories. And then I have his Love in the Time of Cholera, which is illustrated by Luisa Rivera, I believe. Then I have one Red Spine edition, and these are the vintage Red Spine editions, and this is Of Human Bondage by Somerset Maugham. Then I have the Iliad by Homer, and this particular translation is by Peter Green. And I also have the Odyssey by Homer, and the translation here is by Emily Wilson. And Emily Wilson is actually coming out with a new translation for the Iliad, and I'm very excited to pick it up. I think that comes out later this fall. Then I have the 1001 Arabian Nights edition. This is the edition that my mom actually read to me when I was younger, and this is the Oxford University Press edition. And my mom used to read this to me every single night as a little kid. Then I have this Great Gatsby edition, which I believe was a gift from one of my subscribers, and this is illustrated by Adam Simpson. I have another Collected Stories of F. Scott Fitzgerald, and this one is the Barnes Noble Library of Essential Reading. Then I have F. F. Scott Fitzgerald, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, and this is a Penguin Modern Classics edition. Then I have this really, really cool edition of Frankenstein. This has a foreword by Stephen King, and it's illustrated by Bernie Wrightson, but I just think that this edition is so cool. I'm also a really, really big fan of this edition. This is Dracula by Bram Stoker. This one is illustrated by Edward Gorey, I believe. It's absolutely beautiful. It's got like the red velvet, but the illustrations are so gorgeous. I am obsessed. Then I have John Milton's Paradise Lost with an introduction by Philip Pullman, and I like this one because it has some illustrations, which I think is really, really cool. Then I have a James Baldwin, Giovanni's Room. I've heard mixed things about this, but I do still really, really want to read this. Then I actually saw my friend Britt bought this and I immediately wanted to go get it, and it is the collection of Oscar Wilde, and these are just all of the books, I think, by Oscar Wilde, including The Picture of Dorian Gray, which I love. And this is a Wordsworth Library Collection edition. Okay, I have these books and then we are all done. So I have this particular edition of Camilla, then I have Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury, then I have The Wizard of Oz, and this is a penguin thread. So I don't know if you can tell, but the entire cover is actually sewn, which I think is so interesting. Then I have a Signature Classics edition of Frankenstein. I really liked this one. I thought it was really, really cool with the eye and the nose and everything, and I really want to annotate this edition. Then I have another Signature Classics. This one is This Side of Paradise by F. Scott Fitzgerald. This particular one, I got this from Barnes & Noble. I don't know the edition. It's by Simon & Schuster. It is Tender is the Night, but I really, really enjoy the art style of this one in particular. I don't know, I think it looks really, really cool. Then I have another Signature Classics. This is The Beautiful and the Damned by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I believe you can get Signature Classics at Barnes & Noble. And then finally, the last classic that I'm going to share with you today is going to be Animal Farm by George Orwell, the 75th anniversary edition. And I don't actually think, it has a foreword by Ann Patchett if you're looking for it, but I don't know if it has a particular one. And there you have it. Those are all of the classics that I own. I have read some of these, but I have to tell you, I have not been prioritizing classics as much as I have in the past, and I would really, really like to change that because I love reading classics so much and I love discovering new favorite editions. If you have any recommendations for me, especially of books that you've seen that you think I should prioritize, I would love to hear from you. What classics are your favorites and which ones do you think I should pick up? And also I would love to know, what is your very favorite classic edition? Do you have like a favorite collection that you are working on collecting? And if you have made it to this part of the video, please leave me a teacup emoji. I miss my friends so much. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for watching, and a huge, huge thank you to all of my Patreons, especially the Ink and Quill members who are all the executive producers of every single video that I make. I love all of you so much, and until next time, book lovers, keep your head in the clouds and your heart in a book, and I will talk to you very soon. Bye! Always think of you when spring comes, like it's something in the air at that time, don't know why. Always dream of you when spring comes. It's like the heat on my skin